Welcome to Kent Hance, the best storyteller in Texas podcast. We start every episode with the saying of the day. Chancellor, what do you have for us?
Well, I've got a couple. One is that learn from yesterday, live for today, and hope for tomorrow. And I think that's a good one. I had another one, though, that kind of goes along with what we're going to be talking about some today. Never interrupt your enemy when he is making a mistake. And go back to the White House and the confrontation that the president, vice president, secretary of state had with Zelensky, the president of Ukraine. And you think, what was he thinking? Mm-hmm. And the last person I would want to get in an argument with on live TV would be Trump. Once he gets it becomes a personal deal, and he's not going to pull any punches. I mean, he's going to hit you with a lead pipe. I mean, he's going to make sure that he gets his point across. And he's not a guy that you can run over. And Zelensky, he had problems with Biden. Biden had some problems with him. And Trump's not in love with the guy to start with because he appeared with some Democrats in campaign events. And so he was kind of mad about that. But I think the one thing Trump wants, and everybody wants, they want the war to stop. The tens of thousands of people, Russians and Ukraine, that have lost their lives. There's a lot of young men, and there's a lot of mothers and wives really upset. A lot of young men from Russia were sent to the front lines. They were 17, 18, 19 years old. And same with Ukraine. And so it's gone on for 3 years. That was a war that the Russians thought it'd be over in a week or two. And it shows how vulnerable their military is, how out of date, and how they got out of date pretty fast. And it shows how weak they are. Mm-hmm. They wouldn't have a chance against a good army like the United States or like China. Mm-hmm. The Chinese don't run out of people. And the thing got started, J.D. Vance was seated where he could see Zelensky, and he got tired of him rolling in his eyes, and Trump couldn't necessarily see him, and so Vance kind of got into it. Now, a lot of the Democrats say, well, it was set up. They planned it that way. They didn't have to, plan anything. If I'm Zelensky and they start down a controversial road, I'd say, we will get into that in a minute, and thank you, Mr. President, or something like that, to buy time when you're having lunch that you can discuss it when everyone's there.
And the cameras are off.
Yeah, the camera's off. There's no reporters in the room. Mm-hmm. And that's where the negotiation always goes. When you're doing something for the cameras, you've already decided what you're going to do, and you're agreeing to it. The amount of money that American taxpayer has put in Ukraine is substantial, and the president wants to make sure that it's accountable, and that money is accountable, and they can figure out what all they got for it. But one of the things he was trying to do is get these minerals, and I think that was kind of a subterfuge of being able to have American inspectors and maybe troops in Ukraine, and that we'd have interest there, and that Russia wouldn't be tempted to come in, and they wouldn't. They never did under Trump. And once Afghanistan fell, and I've talked about this 2 or 3 times, once Afghanistan went under, it was just a matter of time. One of my friends, that's a former ambassador and former State Department employee, he said it's just a matter of time till Russia invades, Ukraine, because U.S. showed such weakness in Afghanistan, and so it was just a matter of time. What will happen now? The British are already on it, and the French are on it, and trying to figure out what to do. And trying to figure if you go back, you renegotiate. Zelensky, I don't know if they start to have elections again, is he going to win, or or is his people, are they upset? Are they mad? And so that'll be interesting to say. And that, he suspended elections and habeas corpus and a lot of things were suspended during the war. And it'll be interesting to see when that comes back. But this war needs to end. There's a lot of young people dying over something that they have no control over.
I'm curious your thoughts on something with a lot of people saying that, Putin will not stop at Ukraine. He's going to, go into Poland or wherever in Europe. If you truly believe that in the European countries, how come you're not all in on helping the Ukraine?
Yeah.
How come you're not there all in to stop this when you haven't really been, when the United States has been doing all the heavy lifting?
Well, we've been doing the heavy lifting with the money.
Right.
And that's where it's been. And that he should have read the tea leaves, that Trump's not going to come up with that much money. And so he should have been trying to get an out. They said, well, they're talking to the Russians, not talking to us. He had people talking to him at all times. And Putin knows enough not to mess with President Trump. And I just think that the French and the British are going to try to get something done in the next week or so. Try to get this thing, get a ceasefire and get it stopped, and then try to move on. Now, will Russia keep all the land they've taken? They may. It may not. That's up to the people doing the negotiation. And Trump's had some good people that are excellent negotiators involved in this. And so it'll be interesting to see what they come up with or what they'll live with now.
Right.
But they're in worse bargaining shape than they were last Wednesday. They made it worse. And so, I'd have gone in and been very complimentary and thanked him and thanked the American public for all the money that they've put up on this. But I'm amazed at some people that think, well, there's a setup and they decide to do this to, there's some people believe in the conspiracy on everything.
Yeah.
And I've never been a conspiracy nut, and I just don't want to start now. And
one of the things that, if you think it's a conspiracy, I think your thoughts could be changed if you just saw the frustration on Senator Graham's face when that was over. Clearly, Senator Graham from North Carolina had been working with Zelensky. He had met with him that morning. He had coached him up a little bit on how this was going to work. I've never seen a United States senator so disappointed.
Yeah, he was exasperated.
Yeah, that's the word. Yeah,
he was exasperated and was like, "What the hell do we do now?"
Right.
And they didn't. I guess they weren't invited to stay for lunch after that, and I'll say this: there's a lot of people that are involved in wars. Netanyahu, and he doesn't show up in a sweatshirt.
Yeah,
and at the White House. I remember a few years ago there was a volleyball or basketball women's team. They had flip-flops on when they went to the White House, and there was a big story on that. And,
can I ask you a question about Vice President Vance? Yeah. It appears in this first 30, 45 days of Trump's presidency that the vice president in this administration is more visible and more involved than really any vice president that I can recall. Have you noticed that? And do you find that to be true?
He's very involved, and he's a smart guy. His wife is even smarter. She's clerk for justices on the U.S. Supreme Court, and they had a lot. He's got a lot going for him, and Trump likes him, and that's a key. If Trump likes him, and Trump likes a vice president that's going to rally to his side. Regardless what you think about the election in 2020, when Trump and Pence got on different sides on that soured that relationship forever. And but going back to the Zelensky thing, if they're going to salvage anything, they need to do it in the next 2 or 3 weeks. I wouldn't be surprised if Putin doesn't make a move in the next few weeks. If he has the strength to do so, he'll probably try to use this to his benefit,
right,
and shouldn't be allowed to. We have the big problems that Putin did not want Ukraine to be a member of NATO. They're right there on his door. And so we wind up being weak in Afghanistan, and wind up getting in a war over whether they're going to be at NATO or not. I don't see any problem going forward, because if Putin decides to invade Poland, we're close enough to Poland and so the European countries. At some point in time, somebody's going to say, you've got to stop. But his army is proven to be so weak, and that a lot of I was in Russia one time, and you couldn't go 5 miles without seeing some military vehicle pulled over on the side of the road, and the hood was up, and they were working on it.
It wasn't, remember when they were dying for socks? They were so poor they couldn't give their soldiers socks 25, 30 years ago. Now, and it doesn't seem like much has changed, really. They may have socks, but didn't this all kind of start 1989, 1990 when we said we wouldn't expand NATO and made an agreement, and a unified Germany was allowed? And then 94 we didn't. We expanded NATO.
Right.
So doesn't Putin kind of have a...
He's got something to talk about, and they've got something to argue about.
Right.
But they don't have something they ought to be fighting about.
There you go. Yeah.
You know, and that's, anyone can start a war. Not just anyone can solve one or get it stopped. And it's easy to kick a barn down, a lot easier than building one. And they need to get that war stopped. There are people in the United States. Now, I had a girl in one of my classes that she grew up in Ukraine, and she and her parents fled when the war started. But they're good people. You know, I'm not saying that I agree with their leaders or anything like that, but there are a lot of good people around the country, a lot of good people that are Iranians, and they are ruled by people that are not good, that don't like freedom. They want everyone to agree with them.
Right.
It's okay to have different opinion unless it's contrary to theirs. Then it's not okay.
Kind of sounds familiar in this country in the last.
Some people get
last
mad,
years.
you know. But I think they're working on some deadlines, whether they say that or not, that something's got to move in the next 2 weeks to a month. I wouldn't be surprised any day that we don't get something moving in the direction of getting the peace.
What do you think Zelensky's next move is with the White House?
Well, you know, if I were the French or the English working with him, I'd tell him not to go. You know, because I don't think his stature, his ego, I don't think he's going to go in there and say, Mr. President, I'm sorry. You know, I mean, I would advise him to go in and say, I'm sorry for any misunderstanding. We need peace. We know that you can broker it, and we need your protection once we achieve peace. Something like that. But I wouldn't go in with a confrontation. You know, it's just not going to work. And so it'll be interesting to see. But something's going to happen in the next 2 or 3 weeks. If Putin has the military like a strong army, I think he'll go in and try to make some additional grabs.
Yeah.
And they're having to pull up young men from Ukraine. They're running short of manpower. So, you know, look, if you go to a bank to borrow some money and you got a bad financial statement, they're not going to loan you a bunch of money. And if you go to get a peace agreement and the people have taken over a lot of your land, you don't have as many cards to play as you would otherwise. And it's just a matter of fact. And I hope that they can get out when they can get peace. And that's a rich country. They've got minerals, they've got energy, oil, and also they grow a lot of wheat and a lot of farm products. And that I don't know how they're going to rebuild it. They're going to want Zelensky's going to want the Russians to pay for it. The Russians not going to want to pay for it. They're going to pay for their own damage. But it's going to be a lengthy process to rebuild it. There's just too many buildings look like the West Gaza Strip, and that's another one. I laughed when Trump said, "Well, I just put a hotel in there and a little beach or something." He's creative. He always has some thought that nobody else has even thought about, and they go, "Well, I hadn't thought about that."
After he said that about making it a resort area or whatever, they're on the water, I was thinking, as soon as he said that, I bet you Egypt and Jordan were like, hold on.
Yeah,
maybe we want to do that.
Yeah.
And they'll build it. You want to change subjects and talk about KUT, which is the local Austin NPR radio station. They also produce podcasts, and they released one this week that's about you, kind of about you. And the headline reads, and I'd like for you to tell the story. The title of the podcast is "The Time J.R. Ewing from Dallas Visited OPEC to Talk Oil." Now, we've talked about this in past episodes. Yeah. It's your story, and it's a good one.
Well, I got appointed and then got elected to the Texas Railroad Commission, which regulates oil and gas in Texas. A lot of people, they don't know what it does. Anyone in the energy business knows. OPEC knows, because OPEC set up their cartel after seeing and looking at history of what the Texas Railroad Commission was doing. And the price of oil got so low, the Texas Railroad Commission would have each month an allowable, and they would allow you to pump your oil well so many days. Might be 5 days, might be 20 days, but they have an allowable. And going back on that, the price went down in 86, 87. Price of oil went down. And I got put on the Railroad Commission, and the price of oil was about $6, $7. And there were a lot of buildings vacant. There were a lot of real estate investments had gone bad. And so I decided to go see OPEC. And I went to every meeting for a period of about 3 or 4 years, and that they set the price of oil. And if I'm a carrot farmer and there's some group that sets the price of carrots, I'm going to know them. I want to know them. I want to have some input with them. And so I was at the OPEC meeting in Vienna. They meet 3 times a year in Vienna and then once in Geneva. And there was a newspaper article that Larry Hagman and Linda Gray, who was an actress on the Dallas TV show, that they were there doing a play. And so I called the theater and told him I was a friend of his, and would you have him call me? And he called me. And I told him what I was doing, and he said, "That's great." I said, "Would you like to go meet the OPEC?" He said, "Yeah, that'd be great."
Go meet the leaders at OPEC?
OPEC, yeah. Would you like to go meet the OPEC leaders and their officers and all their oil and gas delegations and the oil minister of Kuwait and Saudi Arabia and Venezuela? And yeah, I'd do that. And so I took, Larry Hagman and Linda Gray over to the meeting and told them I was bringing them. Boy, they were all there. Wasn't anybody absent. And they stood in line. They were trying to butt in line to get up there and get their picture made with him. But they didn't pay any attention to Linda Gray. She's a beautiful lady and a very good actress. She stayed a few minutes, and they were all trying to get Larry Hagman, and so she just left.
Now, did Larry Hagman do the hat and the boots and the whole thing?
Oh, yeah. He had on his boots. He had on his cowboy hat, and he walked in there, and it was a white cowboy hat. And he said that shows you're a good man if you got a white cowboy hat on. And they'd all grown up watching Dallas on TV. And so, it was a highlight for them. And after that, anytime I'd go meet him, they'd come over and say, "How's Larry doing?" Like he'd check with me every day about what was going on. I said, "He's doing great, great."
Yeah.
He wished y'all would help get the price of oil up, stabilize the economy. And but they had a picture in the Vienna newspaper the next day, and it said, it said JR meets OPEC was a headline. JR meets OPEC, and everybody got a pretty good chuckle out of it.
I think it's incredibly creative that you made that phone call to get him to come over and meet everybody.
I thought that they probably wouldn't give him the message or anything like that.
Yeah.
They gave him the message, and he called me right back. And I told him, he said, that'd be great. Let's do it. He was all for it.
Oh, it's hysterical.
He gave me free tickets that night to the show.
Yeah.
And there were a bunch of the OPEC ministers had gotten tickets on their own. They were there to watch him.
How great is that?
It was really funny.
Larry Hagman was quite a character.
Oh, he was. He was. He grew up in the Fort Worth area and was he could just take any subject and make a spin on it. Just talk like he'd known about it forever.
That might be one of my favorite stories.
Yeah,
it's hysterical. Very powerful people just lining up.
Oh,
they
wanted their picture made with JR. J.R. Ewing's coming to the OPEC meetings.
Oh, it's funny.
I got there a little ahead of time, and they were where are they? Did they cancel? They were concerned, and they wanted to get their picture made, and some of them they had the picture made, and then they had it. They had the local newspaper in their country run pictures of, in Venezuela. A guy sent me a picture from Venezuela, and there was a picture in there of JR and the oil minister from Venezuela, and a guy by the name of Gonzalo Plaza. Mm-hmm. Somebody said, "Now, what's the guy? He's on the board of governors of OPEC from Venezuela." I said, "It's Gonzalo Plaza." And they said, that sounded like a cheap shopping center in San Antonio. But Gonzalo Plaza was a great guy, and he's since deceased. But he was a good oil minister and was good to work with. But he wanted his picture made with JR.
I bet.
None of them acted like, well, that's not a big deal. They all acted, that's a big deal, and I want my picture made with them now.
And poor old Linda Gray just standing over there going,
she's standing over there.
She's a beautiful lady.
She is.
Yeah.
And very nice. And she said, I believe I'll go back to the hotel. And she left. And they were all trying to they wanted his autograph. And,
that's great.
I mean, it was pretty funny.
You'll be forever known at the OPEC meetings as the guy that brought JR.
Yeah. Brought him. I had one of the guys at first OPEC meeting I went to, he said, now look, keep your eye on the oil minister from Libya. And if he gets up and goes to the bathroom, go with him. And I went, why? Mm-hmm. Why would I follow this guy to the restroom? He said he got up and went to the restroom in 1970-something. And he said as soon as he left the room, Carlos, the international terrorist, came in and kidnapped the rest of us.
Oh.
And had him for about 3 days. So, boy, I'm sitting there at the meeting. I zero in on the Libyan oil minister. And he gets up and goes to the restroom. And, I mean, the room just, it's just a vacuum. Everybody's gone.
Oh, that's funny.
And the chairman said, we'll have a break right fast. and we got out of there.
Wow. Amazing. I was thinking about it. It's here our March big time basketball coming up here with the tournaments and
tournaments. I saw Texas Tech got beat by Houston a week ago. They had 2 of their starters out, but they had it packed. Mm-hmm. Had 15,500 people at the game, and it was loud. And the Houston coach said something. There was a great atmosphere, and it they had a lot of people there, and fire marshal had to keep them from getting out of hand.
Did you see what happened at the Tech game last week? The kid putting the golf.
Yeah, that was at that game.
It was at that game.
Yeah,
okay.
It was that
so
game.
Tell everybody what happened.
And he Pratt and he put from one end, and they had a little hole that you had to go through, and he putted, and it looked like it might go in, and it looked like it might go in, and it did. Mm-hmm. And so he went and did a body jump with Patrick Mahomes, who was at the game.
Yeah.
And then he got on Today's Show, and they gave him a headset, got them all that publicity, and they got thinking about it, and they gave him a scholarship for next semester. So the athletic department was giving him a scholarship for next semester.
Golf coach might want to talk to him.
Yeah, might want to talk to him. I mean, of course, we had Liv Edberg, and he's a great golfer, and he won a tournament week before last,
right?
Genius, and he's a heck of a golfer.
He is. He won the Genesis. Out in Phoenix, and he is from
Sweden.
Sweden, yeah.
Somebody said, "Where's he from?" And I said, "He's from a suburb outside of Lubbock." And they said, "Where?" And I said, "Sweden." And they went, "Yeah, okay."
A lot of people in the golf world say he is the future of golf, and
yeah.
will definitely be at some point the number one golfer in the world.
Yeah.
So good things coming out of Lubbock.
One thing that I was going to mention today, March 3rd, is that in 1913, they had the first women's suffrage parade in Washington, D.C., and it was huge.
Mm-hmm.
And in less than a decade, all women could vote. I think the funniest thing, some people would say, well, it doesn't matter. They're just going to vote how their husband tells them. Whoever said that has never been married or they've never been around a woman or something. They're going to have their own opinion. They're going to vote the way they want to. Mm-hmm. I'd hate to try to tell somebody who they could vote for, that some female. Also, in 1991 was when the Rodney King incident happened, where he got beat up by the police that were chasing him. Mm-hmm. Before then, and even since then, there are certain people they know that if you run from the police, there's Chris Rock says this. Chris Rock says if you run from the police, there's going to be an ass whipping when they catch you, And that Chris Rock one time was talking about, a lot of the do-good groups were saying, don't eat red meat. Red meat will kill you. And he said, it's the green meat. If it's turned green, that'll kill you. Be careful. He's a funny guy.
Just to be clear, though, you're not justifying the beating that Rodney King took. No. Okay,
absolutely not. I mean, it changed a lot of things. I want to make sure that people understand that changed a lot of things.
Mm-hmm.
And it changed. It brought about body cameras.
Mm-hmm.
It brought about a lot of things. And but as a practical matter, Chris Rock was right, saying when they catch you, they're going to whip your butt. And that it's not right, but that you need to know that if you're going to make a run.
Who was your friend that said the goal when you get pulled over by a police officer is that you both go home?
Larry Coffey.
Yeah.
And he said the goal when you get pulled over is both of you go home.
Mm-hmm.
You may be mad. He may be mad. They may give you a ticket. If your rights were violated, there's a court. You can go talk to the court about it. They may think that you did something wrong, and they'll go talk to the court about it. But the number one thing that you want to do is make sure both of you go home.
Boy, that's a good lesson.
It's a good lesson.
I've got a daughter about to get her driver's license. She's going to know that lesson before she gets it for sure.
Tell her be sure and let me know what street she's going to be on. I want to know. Alexander Graham Bell was born on March 3rd in 1847. And I was reading a book about him. His mother and his wife were both deaf.
Really?
And he was trying to find ways to help them communicate, is how he discovered the telephone. And he was one of the first persons to come up with instruments for airplanes.
Really?
And is a brilliant guy. The funny thing, though, that I found reading about him, there was one thing he would not let people do, and that was put a phone in his office or his study, because he didn't want to be bothered. And he said that break your train of thought and it'd bother you. And if you're an inventor, you need to be concentrating on what you're trying to invent. And I thought that was pretty funny that
he would freak out today if he saw everybody's faces buried in their phones. Yeah.
And he founded AT&T, and he was originally from Edinburgh, Scotland.
Mm-hmm.
and they moved to Canada and then the United States, and he was homeschooled. And but he learned a lot and had an inquisitive mind. His dad was an inventor, and he had a couple of brothers that were in inventions, and that he was always good about making deadlines, and he had set deadlines for himself. And that there's a study that Toronto University just did, and they said that if you turn in a paper late, it's going to get a bad grade just because it's late. If you turn something in and it's past due, it's late, it can be exactly the same. It's still going to get a bad grade because it was late. And a lot of people argue over that. There was a deal the other day that on Chat GPT, that it's being used a lot in arguments with couples. And women use it more than men, and women will be in an argument with their husband or boyfriend about something, and they'll go to the restroom. They go in there and get on Chat GPT, and they'll come up with all the arguments. You go in and just slaughter them, And so that's something that's pretty unusual. And speaking of unusual things, there's a guy who had a rent car from Hertz, and it said unlimited miles. And he had it for a month, had the car for a month, and he got 25,000 miles. I mean, that's a lot of miles.
In a month?
Yeah, in a month. You're talking about 800 miles a day. He's driving 50 miles an hour. You're talking about having to drive, 16 hours.
Wow.
And I doubt anybody's going to drive 50 miles an hour in this day and time, but even 75 or something, it's still going to be 12 hours to 13. And and he got in a fight with them over the bill because they charged him $10,000 because he just drove the wheels off of it. And he was going to court, and they decided to settle with him, and because it said unlimited mileage. And if it says unlimited mileage, that's probably what they meant to say. They just didn't realize that somebody's going to take advantage. I had a friend in Lubbock named Robert Lugo, and he had a Tex-Mex place, and he had all you could eat for I think $2.50 or something like that. It's been a long time ago. And Eddie Clements, who's now on the radio, KLBJ, Eddie Clements has never seen a taco or enchilada he didn't like. And he and his buddies would go over there, and I think they finally broke Lugo. He stopped having the all you can eat. I mean, they'd go over there about noon and leave about 1:30 or 2. And on Fridays they'd drink a little beer and eat a little more. And so I always accused Eddie of putting Lugo out of business. Lugo was a great guy, great friend. Have a good day, and remember, you learn from yesterday, you live for today, and you hope for tomorrow.